Well, hello everyone. Hi everyone online, and it's nice to see so many people here in person. So I really appreciate all the support. And I had support yesterday. So Evan, my practice buddy for the practice period yesterday, we went over the talk and it was way too long. And so we edited some pieces of it and I edited some more afterwards. So thank you for your help. And For this talk, I pulled from personal experiences as well as the books Living by Vow by Shohaku Okamura and Jan Chozen Bays, who is one of Peg's teachers. She's at Great Vow Zen Monastery, and she wrote the book, The Vow-Powered Life, A Simple Method for Living with Purpose. So I'm really excited to give this talk. So it's something I've been thinking about for the last few months now. So Okamura states, vow holds the same importance for Buddhists as prayer does for Christians. Led by vow, not pulled by karma. I've heard this before, probably many times. I think this, as well as looking at impermanence, suffering, and the self-centered dream, what they remind me of are hamburgers, hot dogs, and chicken nuggets. You know, when you're a kid, or at least when I was a kid, you get chicken nuggets or hamburgers, and they're great. And you eat them a lot. And when you ask what you want, you say chicken nuggets or a hamburger. And then one day, you realize chicken nuggets come from a chicken. Hamburger comes from a cow. From a real living being that's now not living anymore. And then you freak out a little bit. And then over time, the realization fades. And then conditions change, and it comes up strongly for you again. This is my relationship with a lot of these Buddhist concepts, including being led by vow. So I'll take you back to about, I guess, 6 months ago or so, November 2024. I was playing poker and on the side, and poker is becoming increasingly technical, less meaningful, less purposeful. And one of my clients at the same time was discussing enlightenment in one of our sessions. We were having an integrated intensive around the same time on enlightened activity. In my mind, I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. I can become more familiar with this concept and perhaps bring something to our future sessions. How can I not take advantage of this? Another part of me was like, when was the last time I did an intensive? It's December, this intensive, it's cold, it's dark, leaving the house around 6-ish, working all day and then not returning until 9-ish at night, every day of the week. I hesitated again and again. That's a lot. Well, the underlying vow that I made in my work to support my clients won out, and I signed up. That's all well and good, but what happens when the alarm rings? Would I get up? The words that helped me get up were led by vow, not pulled by karma. How I define karma in my own mind, and then I'll talk about how others define it, is being pulled based on your emotions, your immediate preferences. So if I use the skandhas template, it would be, one form, this body, and oh, it's so warm here. This feeling tone is pleasant. The perception is I feel cozy. And the mental formation, that the story that comes is, well, Appamada folks, they're so understanding. They'll be okay if I'm not there. I think they'd want me to get good sleep, really. So that's where I was. If we are pulled by our emotions, and our emotions are always changing this way, that way, that way, where do we end up? What path are we on? Our emotions and thoughts are fleeting. A vow has direction. So when the alarm rudely awakened me, being led by vow and pulled by karma, is what I said to myself. And wouldn't you know, I got up each day. I was able to support my client more symbolically, because many other issues and topics of more concern to them arose, and we really didn't talk about that again. My own practice and supporting my Sangha. This gave me a direction, gave me more understanding. I presented on the 3 marks of existence in that intensive and had a deeper appreciation for the Buddhist concept of suffering, in particular suffering and its relationship to what happens if our mental faculties change, which is related to the work I do in a memory center. So Jan Chosen Bays, she said that she really didn't understand the importance of vows until she saw a video clip of her late teacher, Mazumi Roshi, talking about it in a recorded interview. The interviewer said, "Christians believe in a soul that continues after this life. Do Buddhists believe in something permanent that continues after death?" And he said, "No, rather, we believe in the vow." She then realized she's watching this clip with her students due to Mazumi Roshi's vow, a force that continued after his death. So we think about our calcium in our bones, the carbon in our flesh. These things don't disappear when we die. They don't go away. They go on to form the bodies of new beings. Our actions, laced by vow, continue also after death and have an effect on bodies and minds well into the future. Thus, the energy of a strong vow does not die with the person, but moves through time, changing as it is picked up by new people, always continuing to bear fruit. Vows are everywhere, if you look closely enough. The persons who spent their working lives creating and now modifying cars, planes, the internet, Zoom, there can be vows by terrorists to kill anyone seen as the enemy as well. So it's important to remember vows are not inherently good or bad. They simply channel our energy. We determine the direction. Chosen Bays states the most similar phrase to the Buddhist term vow in English is deep life purpose. When we are clear about our purpose, we take an active role in directing the chain of cause and effect. I recently had dinner with 2 social workers who previously served as interns under my supervision as the last requirement before completing their graduate degree. One was 6 years ago and one just last year. They work together now at a different agency. The former one was telling the more recent graduate what she learned or internalized from me and how she utilizes some of these lessons in the present day with clients. These are teachings and lessons in working with clients that some of them I didn't recall myself. I forgot. And some were unique to that particular supervisor-intern dynamic. The energy, the intentionality of our actions has an impact, whether we get the opportunity years later to witness it or not. Okumura states part of the definition for a bodhisattva is to live by vow and not pull by karma. He defines karma as habit, preferences, or a ready-made system of values. For instance, what we learn via culture and how we start to frame the world, and these can be unconscious manifestations, such as you think about TV and materialism, you think of values like, I need to be happy, I need a fast car, I need fast food, I need Coca-Cola. And that idea that happiness comes from things outside of us, it's also there. Individualism, to be the best, and including the stress that entails. Feeling important, maybe to be quote unquote busy or efficient, that one is indispensable at the risk of burnout. And my partner Jennifer says a good reminder for this belief is the graveyard is full of indispensable people. A focus on youth and trends, a focus on culture, a focus on winning, being happy, may lead towards not turning towards difficult emotions. What is the pursuit of the American dream and what challenges does it also bring us? Peg at the intensive recently, she said, in this new culture of fear all around us, joy is a subversive act. In the Anapanasati Sutra, joy and happiness are invited or cultivated, as well as the practice of not clinging to these states. Liberation is beyond inhabiting a particular state. It's beyond happiness. Values are definitely not inherently bad, but are we being pulled by them with and without our awareness? And how do our cultural values impact our practice here at Appamada? Head student. This role of head student, something new happened that definitely never happened before with my practice. Probably because I never really had a role beyond Sangha member before in this practice. My conditioning really arose. Peg says conditioning is elastic. And I definitely felt that, like a rubber band. I realized that I had a part that wanted to do everything really well, to know more about everything, to be the best. Of course, with that, the judginess arises, the feelings of less than arise, and when inevitably I and no one can meet that measure, this is really difficult. And a lot of tightness came in the body. And I was, and likely still it comes up. And getting caught in this self-centered dream. So easy that arises, even when we're practicing Zen here. Writing for this talk, an interesting idea came up. I could never be the best, whatever that is. I thought of the Buddha. I thought of Bodhidharma and his practice. I thought of Peg and Flint and their dedication and deep knowledge of the Dharma. I thought about Kim and his vigor. I thought about, Rosemarie being remote and during intensives and sittings, she's always there and present and engaged. And even like, I think a few days ago, we had a technical issue with our computer. And so it went out, the connection, and so we rang the bell and people online couldn't hear it. And minutes later, Rosemarie was still sitting. I would have definitely, if it was me, I would definitely would have checked. I would have, I find it hard to practice remotely for that reason. It's really difficult, and she does it day in, day out. So anyways, so I realized I couldn't be the best, even if I wanted to. And then I laughed at the strange illusion. My body lightened and became less tense, and I fell asleep. It's true. So Okamura states, no matter how hard or long we practice, if our practice is based on ego, based on the roles we take on, we are totally deluded. Even though we are practicing the Dharma, he says we are practicing totally against the Dharma. I think roles in Zen practice carry additional responsibility, can deepen one's practice, but also carry additional risk. Getting caught now in this role, something else to cling to, something else for me to identify with as part of who I am. No matter how, so again, his words, no matter how hard or long we practice, if our practice is based on ego, based on the roles we take on, we are totally deluded. It made me think, what is my vow with head student? I know my somewhat unconscious ones. My vow to start the year was to deepen my practice. Chosen Bay suggests that when looking for your vow, we often need to go deeper. So asking why to what comes up initially is important. Why did I want to deepen my practice? To find some meaning, to support myself and others in this life. And I did want to do that. I aspire to that. And this opportunity allows me to do that and to offer something back. So I don't want to squander this time. Not being pulled by karma at all may be similar to saving all beings, being aware at all times of how our culture and inherited or conditioned habits may influence our next action, just like saving all beings, erasing all delusions, may not be possible. Particularly because we are of this culture. We grew up in it before we recognized we were a separate self. So I wonder if it is the consistent intention and effort to be led by vow, and also repentance. Repentance. This is the charged word. So this, all of this led me to bring up an interesting question. How do you know a vow until maybe you've broken it? Can you really break a vow? No, is what Okumura says. A life led by vow is a life animated or inspired by vow, not one that is watched, scolded, or consoled by vow. Zazen is itself the practice of vow, and Zazen is itself the practice of repentance. Think of your sitting. How many times do you get lost in thoughts, lost in making lists, lost in pain, lost in your opinions? And you come back. That willingness to return reflects our vow. And our getting lost reflects our repentance. So I'll go into the definition of it. Okumura writes that in Buddhism, repentance does not mean saying I'm sorry because of some mistake I made, some mistake that you made in a form or sitting. As Buddhists, repentance means awareness of our imperfections and limitations. Vow and repentance are two kinds of energy that enable us to continue our practice. We will get lost in thought, and we have a willingness to return. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. This is a repentance verse, expressing acknowledgement and acceptance of our afflictions, of our past harmful actions. Since we are working at something infinite and absolute, it's important to reflect on the fact that we can never accomplish it, like the Bodhisattva vows. We cannot be perfect. This awakening and also this deep acceptance to our own imperfection is repentance. That's the part with repentance, is that we can look at it as a way to fully accept who we are and how we are, all of it. We are human, we are imperfect, we have limitations, no matter how much we practice. And this is, a vow is not something we do with our intellect or shallow emotion. As a bodhisattva, we can never say I have achieved all vows. We vow towards the Buddha, towards wisdom and compassion, towards something bigger than ourselves, towards the absolute and infinite. Okumura states we enter enlightenment when we enter the posture of Zazen and are of the absolute when we practice Shikantaza. He states as human beings living at the intersection of the universal self and the ego-centered self, we cannot live without being led by vow as the direction of our lives. So that example of like being in a warm bed, not wanting to get up, not wanting to, kind of this, being in this immediate experience, that's kind of how vow is so integral. Up and down. Okumura states that even in our practice, we need to work with this attitude of up and down. Sometimes sitting in our zazen, we feel great. Sometimes we feel we are enlightened. Sometimes we feel we're in hell. In any situation, we just go through it. When we are living in vow, in our emotion, in our human sentiment, there are good times and hard times. When we're living in vow, in our emotion, in our human sentiment, there are good times and hard times. And yet we can find a peaceful basis, a foundation for our life, which is never moved by human sentiment. That is vow. That reality, that can be the reality of our life. Herein, one's peaceful life is found. In a world of impermanence, ever-changing, we are still human beings with emotion, with sentiments, preferences, aversions, And also we have the steadying compass of vow. We have a path to Buddha's way. So that section feels really important. And how could I understand this? So for me, using a game helps. And I use poker. So in poker, there can be really large ups and downs, and one doesn't control the outcome. You can have an 80% chance to win with one card to come and still lose the biggest pot of the night, defining your week, maybe defining your month, but you rest in the mathematical principles that in the long run, things will run in your favor if you know them, and if you know poker as it is, respecting the game. That is where one rests through the short-term chaos, but you still feel, so you know that, but you still feel what it's like to lose a $500 pot. But you have faith in your poker practice and what you know about the realities of the game. Playing 155 hours last year with big ups and downs, this understanding brought a settling, brought direction. Professionals can lose a $5,000, $10,000 pot and still immediately buy back in, understanding the game and over years of practice, developing an equanimity within it. That is the easier way for me to understand this concept, and a sense of peace he refers to when he discusses led by vow, as I have touched this on a much smaller scale, in poker. So we can have vow and we can still have feelings, but there can be a steadiness with it. So my own reflections. In reflecting on vow, I found it, reflecting on it recently, last couple of weeks, I found it to be of support in my relationships. So my partner Jennifer had asked me how she looks in a particular dress a few days ago. So I often take the action based on my desire to avoid discomfort and my desire to feel emotionally level. That's kind of where I go. But, and it's a really important principle for Jennifer, we were working on cultivating a vow of honesty. So I told her what I thought, that it didn't look great. And she really appreciated it. So it is where she is. Yeah, so anyways. That was I could see some movement there. So there are some vows that we may not be conscious of. Chosen vase says like a vow to life, because how much time we spend nourishing ourselves and our body, and we do it when we feel good or bad. And also in terms of something we're not fully aware of, Buddha nature can be defined in different ways, including our inherent wisdom and compassion. It reminds me of when I was studying counseling and I loved Carl Rogers, founder of the person-centered approach and influential in the shaping of modern counseling. He said one of the core conditions is unconditional positive regard towards the client. I thought, how am I supposed to do that? How does that work? What are the steps to that? Nowhere in the books I read from him did he clarify how one was supposed to do that. I would repeat it like unconditional positive regard, like a mantra before I had visits. I didn't know what to do. And then I started to realize this is more of a thing that is revealed. When we put our self-centeredness or agendas or fears away, this is what comes up. I heard John Eric talk about Hakomi and the concept of basic goodness. And in internal family systems, the concept of self with all of these positive qualities. So there are things that are there that we didn't create but inherited, that basic goodness or Buddha nature. And so Okamura states our vows need to come from a deeper place, and I think this is why he says that. So vows can be a magnet or a compass that shows us the direction of wisdom and compassion. And also in present day action at Upaya, Roshi Joan Halifax has this grace program, this process that she teaches. It's developed on neuroscience and social psychology, and It's really for primarily for professional caregivers such as therapists, physicians, nurses, and others in the helping field, and family caregivers. So I've often recommended this to clients of mine. So Joan Halifax, she was in another country. She's also an anthropologist, and she was watching this little girl. Her dad carried her, miles and miles, and, she needed surgery, and there's very limited resources there, and these surgeons are working, and Joan is there, and she's beginning to kind of get woozy and faint from seeing all of this. And she realizes that if she faints, and I think she may have fainted, that the resources directed to the girl would now have to be directed, some of them, would have to be directed to her. So that, so sometimes that over empathizing, that, that care can not be so useful. So how do we ground ourselves? So she uses this grace, it's a mnemonic, and G is gathering our attention, and R is recalling our intention. So what is our vow? What is our intention here? And A, attuning to self and other, C, considering what will serve, and E, engaging the encounter and ending it. So when we recall our vow, it can change our action. So I work with, caregivers, and there can be, if somebody has Alzheimer's, their spouse, there can be frustration with them repeating themselves over and over. It can be very frustrating. Also, the grief that comes up when maybe they're repeating themselves more, you see changes, and that decline and that grief can come up as like a little edginess, and or if they're concerned about their spouse and them driving, and how we react. So our initial reaction may not be useful. So grace creates a little bit of space, and then we can call, why am I here with this person? Because I love them, because I want to care for them, and it can be individualized. So kind of stepping back, having that space. So I'm going to skip to our exercise. So Chosen Bay has found that people gain insight through the investigation of life vows. When we ponder what we want to do in life, we think, what do I want to do? What will make me happy? This frames us at the center of a very small box of awareness. Vows help us to enlarge the framework of our life so that our life energy and talents can be of real benefit and lasting benefit to others. What was Peg's vow? Look at where we are now. We are right here. So do to others' vows, whose box of awareness included themselves and others, a wider container. So we're going to move to exercises now. But before I do that, I want to encourage, if you haven't already signed up for a tea with the head student on the Appamada appointments page, please, if you have a slight interest, if you have no interest, don't worry about it. If you have a slight interest, then I encourage you. And we can find a time, we can meet in person if those things don't, just let me know. So we'll move to exercises now. Okamura writes a vow, that a vow should not come from an intellectual place or emotional impulse. It should be deeper. So what we'll do, we have like 14 minutes, it looks like. So we'll break up in groups of 3, and the question is, let's see, what is the question? Here it is. So if your doctor told you you had 2 years to live, what would you do? What would your vows be? And how would you actualize them day to day? And if you find your vows in that instance would be the same as now, it can be really helpful to write them down, to put them into words. Because Chosen Bay says we can recite our personal vows in addition to the Bodhisattva vows and other things that we do here. We can do that in the morning, at night, So break up in groups of three. I guess let's do like 10 minutes. And we'll do 5 minutes of 5 minutes of writing, and then we'll just have 5 minutes of an open discussion. So you can share what comes up, in that time with each other. Okay, hello. So we just have time for a couple of reflections. Anybody want to share what came up for them in the talk or in their own personal reflections? Yeah, Darcy.
Right at the end was Becky, Elizabeth, and I, and we were realizing that although we had said very different things, it was all about being fully alive. That our vow, that's what our vow had to do with. And we ended with Becky getting cut off, and I'm curious about the rest of her sentence was death is, and then we didn't hear the rest. So that's what I wanted to add.
Okay. I just really wanted to say thank you, Jess. Such an incredibly full and wonderfully authentic talk, and it's just so good to hear your voice. And you and I have been in practice discussion a long time together, so I know you in that way. And seeing you come forward in this way is just such a beautiful gift. So thank you so much.
Thank
Very
you.
lovely.
Okay. Lisa has her hand raised. Lisa has her hand raised.
Thank you, and thank you to Malin and Ramona for being my partners. And Jeff, your talk was very beautifully crafted, and also the exercise. It's just a really sweet reminder. So much happened in just a few minutes. We always start with a little uncertainty, I think. And just because of the way our energies, something beautiful arises, and we had a terrific influence on each other, and we all wanted to live beyond ourselves. And that's what we did in those few minutes. We expanded ourselves. So it didn't feel like there were boundaries.